Welcome to Bards and Barrels, the podcast for Dungeons & Dragons players, new and old. I'm Phil Boone, and I'm joined by my friends and co-hosts, Ross Struess and Brett Miller. We'll be exploring the world of Dungeons & Dragons in each episode, sharing our experiences, offering tips and advice for those who play and run this classic game. So whether you're a new player just starting out, or a seasoned veteran looking to get a new perspective on things, Bards and Barrels has something for everyone. So sit back, grab a drink, and join us as we roll for initiative and embark on an epic adventure. There it is, the opening crack. Welcome to Bards and Barrels. How are we feeling, guys?
Hey, it's a good night for some D&D.
For some D&D, that's right.
Great night for some D&D. We have a class review for you again tonight. We're going to be reviewing the Monk, but before we jump into that, DnDBeyond has just released their 2023 Unrolled, is what they're calling it. But looking back at some of the statistics that they have captured over the last year, I just wanted to hit on a few of these that I kind of found interesting to see what you guys think. Let's start with names.
This one is so good. Like, I have definitely fallen into this. The most popular name of all NPCs. Is it all NPCs? All characters? I don't know.
It's all characters, period.
Bob.
Second year running.
And they're like, it's still Bob.
Bob.
I've used Bob as a name before.
I definitely have not used Bob.
Really?
I have not used Bob.
Not. No.
But I could just see somebody, I could just see at your table, Brett, being like, what's that guy's name? You're like, I don't know, Bob.
Normally, if I say it,
Robert?
it's Jim Bob. The most declining, though, one of them is Eddie, which I think is a fall off of Stranger Things not being released this year. It was 2022.
That
That's
makes
true.
sense. Rando, short for random.
Random, I would think so.
It's an
Probably.
interesting one, too. But
Bruno, we don't talk about
We
it.
don't
so
talk
he's
about Bruno.
fair.
declined.
Fair. Serafina for growth. Interesting. Why? I don't know the reference, if there
I
is
was
one.
trying to remember where I've heard this name before.
Is it like a play on Seraphim? Like,
Nah, that's too deep.
okay. And Link, Breath of the Wild /
Yeah.
or like, yeah, all of the games that have been released recently, I would assume. But
I'm sure Link is always
Oh.
probably pretty high based on just game popularity at the time.
yeah, fair.
So I know Serafina from his Dark Materials. I don't know if you've read, if anybody's ever read that book.
I did not.
There's a character in there named Serafina Pekkala, but it's spelled differently. So I don't think this is the same one influencing the most growing, one of the most growing names.
You also wonder how many people hit the like random generator button. Maybe Serafina came up a lot.
I don't feel like I get cool names like that when I use the random name generator. I get crap that I can't pronounce most of the time.
That's half the fun. You just add a little phlegm.
They
and you
need
go
to
with it.
It just goes.
They need to have like a click button to like have it say the name to you on there.
That would be amazing.
Ooh, yes.
Then you just get Microsoft voice saying something really dumb. Serapina.
All right. We're going to move on after Serapina over there. Interestingly enough,
We're gonna see that character come up soon.
the
Curse of Straw. Hello, Serapina.
going to be your monk's name now. Interestingly enough, so D&D, the next thing they have listed on here is species instead of race, which I thought was kind of just an interesting
yeah.
distinction.
I think that's D&D as a whole trying to get rid of race to like PC themselves.
I don't disagree with it by any means, but for those that are interested what they mean by species, most of these in the table align with what we would have historically called races in older versions of the rules.
And what you can still find in pretty much all the books.
Anything printed basically right now, yeah. We'll see what the new handbook holds this
Ooh,
year.
good point.
But
I didn't really see anything overly surprising in that species list, though, as far as like the ones that are the most used: human, elves, dragonborns leading the way, tiefling, half elves, dwarfs. It's basically everything that's in the player's handbook, because you even get down like to the half orc, halfling, things like that. The only interesting one is gnome fell a little farther down the list than I expected it would, because it is one of the main species.
it doesn't have that much for like oomph
Mm-hmm.
in abilities boosts. Human is excellent pretty much for any class.
Sure.
So it's easy for pretty much anybody to take a human as a race or species.
And I guess we're talking about being lower on the list, but even the gnome had between 80 and 100,000 uses. So
Yeah.
like we're not talking about 5 people used a gnome this year. I mean, it's still a ton.
No, but human is over 700,000.
Correct. Yeah, that would be the difference. I play an Aasimar, and that's 4th from the bottom, but I don't know. I kind of randomly found that, and it's when I found it, it was listed as a human subvariant. So technically, I thought it fell under human anyway, with like lineages within it.
Oh, sure.
So
one of the interesting things I think from the article they kind of posted along with this is that they talk about how some of the small folk, like the dwarves, halfling, gnomes, they're some of the least popular standard races, but that also they found similar information from the opening weekend stats on Baldur's Gate 3, that they were some of the least picked species as well.
Interesting.
So it carried over into the game as well.
I feel like, and I could be wrong, but there might be some stereotyping going on that if you play a little person and you're trying to be a badass, you may think that it's harder to do that. Not necessarily so.
They also mention movement speed.
Oh, true. Yeah, because they would have a lower movement speed, yeah. And in a video game, that can hurt.
Absolutely.
I don't want to dash everywhere. That'd be a pain in the ass.
Oof.
Well, you're wasting actions.
Yep.
At that point. So.
I feel like I can finagle my DM occasionally in a game to get away with some of that, but in a video game, it's a very hard line to how far I can move.
Can't finagle the programmers.
Can't finagle the programmers. I can click wherever I want, but I'm only moving my 20 to 30 feet.
Yeah, they're sticklers on that, I guess.
So, you know.
Classes. Any surprises here?
Not really at the bottom, with Monk, the one we're talking about today, coming in pretty much last, other than an Artificer coming in the bottom 2. But hopefully, with what we're going to talk about today, maybe we can move that up a little bit.
I would guess that Artificers are just complex classes to play. There's just a lot to them. The one that surprised me, well, not surprised me, didn't surprise me that it's this high, is the Wizard at 4. What I would like to know is how many of those people created a new character that wasn't a wizard within like 2 weeks of playing it.
What I thought was interesting is that Wizard and Warlock are both significantly higher than Sorcerer as far as kind of those 3 go. I also, to your Artificer point, it's not in the original like Player's Handbook.
True.
Correct. Yeah, that's true.
So that could be part of that as well. Now, several of these, I mean, they're tight. Like,
So the top ones are Fighter, Rogue, Barbarian, and then Wizard for the top 4.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Fighter is definitely the clear number 1, but Rogue and Barbarian, pretty close. Wizard, Paladin, Warlock, really tight there in that second group. And then Clerics, Rangers, Bards, and Druids are like a third group that is very tight. And then Sorcerers, Monks, and Artificers kind of fall off at the end. So interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So where do our characters fall? I'm a Paladin, so I at least came in, 5th? How about you guys?
I've got right now a Fighter and a Warlock running. So first and what is that, 6th?
True. My other character's a Rogue, so I got 2 on that one.
I'm running a Rogue, and if you count Yostix is a Cleric.
Yeah, we count
Oh, and a
Yostix. Of course he can.
Yostix counts himself
Can't not. Of course he does.
every day.
Counts himself twice for his second leg. His third leg. Sorry, not his second leg. I guess everybody has a second leg. Oh my God. Just excuse me. I'm going to leave now.
All right. Anything else notable that you guys kind of saw in there that caught your interest for their kind of year-end wrap-up?
There was one about the top searches were for Druid and Dragon. And then related, the top 5 articles that they had on there were Druid 101, Wild Shape Guide. And my bet is that is coming out of the D&D movie, and everybody looking up, how many wild shapes can you have per long rest?
I think we've talked about that before.
We have. They kind of fluffed that on the movie.
Go back and see our episode on reviewing the D&D movie. Season 1, like episode 4 or something like that.
It's a fun one.
I also thought it was interesting that at least the one they listed fourth on their top 5 articles was what is Dungeons and Dragons, which may also be influenced by the movie. People actually seeing it and then coming to check out the game and get into it and play.
Yeah, the one that kind of caught me in the articles was the embracing your wild side, playing as a lycanthrope in D&D.
I don't know too many people that have played werewolves or were creatures.
That's
so
probably the more experienced players digging into that one.
It sounds like a challenging party dynamic, potentially.
Well, yeah. every so often you just turn into a freaking wild animal.
You have to have one extra person watching while you rest.
What if you didn't turn into like a werewolf or something cool? You turned into like a were-rabbit, and really what they had to do is remember to pick you up so you didn't get lost.
That'd be pretty good. Well, what else is out there? There's were-rats that have official stat blocks, like were-tigers,
Were-ravens.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty much
really
any.
good.
I mean, you could finagle it, so you could be just about anything. I
A
feel
were-crab.
I don't know if that exists, but it does now.
Yes.
At least in my brain.
All right.
Is that what's in Moana?
A were-crab?
Ooh. I mean, maybe Komatoa.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's just
Probably just
a
regular.
real-
Just
Just-
regular
he's just a
giant.
big old
giant
crab.
crab. Yeah, it's just a giant crab.
Kind of like
Alright.
Phil when he hasn't had his beer. Just becomes a giant crab. Just
Oh.
kidding. Just kidding.
You're not wrong.
Moving on.
All right. Let's get into class review now. So tonight we're looking at the monk. What are your guys' first thoughts on a monk?
For me, I was a little surprised during the build of, at least at level 1, how few things you have to really pick out for this class. We've done a few classes where we've gotten into having to pick spells, or at least picking paths or things like that. I mean, with a monk, you don't even pick your way until you're at 3rd level. So the characters we created for show and tell today, so to speak, we didn't have to do any of that. So it felt
They're going to be pretty similar.
it's a very very straightforward process, which I thought was surprising. Overall, there's not a whole lot of complexity to monks
At this stage.
at this stage. Sure, yeah,
I think it's more complex when you're playing it and getting used to how they play, especially in combat,
sure.
mostly. I was surprised how many different ways you can play a monk. With looking up different pop culture references, I was thinking come down from the mountaintop and punch somebody, and that was all that you could do. No, there's lots of different ways you can have some variety in character build and backstory to give substance to your character.
Yeah, I agree with that point, Brett. I feel like when I initially thought monk, and any monk build that I've ever done historically has been just this martial arts combatant, very much came from a monastery with all of this training. And I do think there is a component of that.
And a lot of monks probably do use that.
And they do. And there's nothing wrong with that. Your unarmed strikes are, your powerhouse, but there are all of these other paths that you can take, which are neat. And a couple of them really are better flavor than they are necessarily skill set. But I think that there's a lot of freedom in that too that I never necessarily have noticed. Kind of speaking along those lines, what are some of the pop culture references, Brett, that you have noticed for these?
Oh, there are so many big ones for this one. So obviously, if you go through any of the 80s, 90s, early 2000s kung fu movies, like Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Jackie Chan, all of those guys are monks in D&D. Then you get Ninja Turtles, you get Goku,
Yeah.
Dragon Ball
Yeah.
Z,
Yeah.
you get Iron Fist, Daredevil, Batman, Yoda and Rey from Star Wars. Those could even be monks. I mean, they do a lot of martial arts. Poe from Kung Fu Panda. So many good
Oh,
fighting
about that.
fisticuff movies.
Rafiki.
Yeah!
Oh, yes.
Hell yeah.
Yes. Mr. Miyagi.
Oh, yes.
That'd be a good one.
There's no shortage of options for this one.
Ryu, Street Fighter.
Yeah. Yeah.
One interesting one that I saw, I'm curious what you guys think. I saw some people mention maybe Neo from the Matrix movies.
Oh,
Interesting.
that would probably be a multi-class of some sort.
I would agree. I would think probably a multi-class. And then another one I saw I was curious about was Beast from the X-Men. Since it's a mutation, does it qualify? But it is kind of a hand-to-hand combatant.
I mean, we've used X-Men for other things too, so yes, why not?
Sure.
I was also thinking like, I don't think about DC characters very often, but like Green Lantern.
You should.
I'm sure.
Ouch.
Like Green Lantern, like because he's part of like that group that could be like almost like a religion. He uses his ring, but I guess it's a weapon.
Is he a sorcerer?
But it's not magic. Like,
yeah, you're right.
Magic isn't inherent to him.
I don't know.
That's an interesting one.
I don't know.
I really don't want to talk about DC characters anymore. So
You brought it up.
I know, but I'm just saying I'm ready to be done. It's fine. I kid. I'm sorry.
You're gonna get us in trouble.
No, it's fine.
All right. Any other pop culture references you could think of that we didn't hit on? I feel like we hit a lot of them. I don't know. You guys. One I want to run by you guys. Maya from Echo. Have you been watching Echo on Disney Plus?
Well, I have not seen it yet, but
No, I haven't yet.
I think that she could classify as a monk. Some of the ability that she gets, I could see being akin to Ki. So I definitely could see that she would potentially be a monk as well.
That's on my list to watch. So I'm gonna be thinking that as I watch through it.
Would recommend.
Right.
Yeah, let me know what you think.
you could in Doctor Strange. So we've clarified that they're sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, whatever you want to categorize them as. They're magic users, but
They're multi.
if we're thinking about like stereotypical monks, they are monks in that sense. Like
Yes.
the meditation, the religious part of it, like all of that, they would be monks as well. So Kamartaj is definitely like your stereotypical monk enclave temple. Their abilities would not classify them that way.
All right, let's move along to pros and cons of the monk. Let's start with the pros.
A pro for me is the key. I think it's a simplified version of your spell slots that if you're not ready to get into that management and using that up quickly, it's very easy that one of your abilities costs this. Use that. When it's gone, right? So it's like if you have the resources to do it, great. If you don't, great. Spell slots very similar, of course, but I feel like you get more key to start with than wizards or warlocks get spell slots most of the time.
I think this one is going to be really fun in combat. Like, you have a lot of movement as a monk, and you can run and gun and punch a lot of things. And being able to punch multiple things per turn, whether that's one attack on a opponent or multiples, you're going to be doing a lot. And it's kind of like a super awesome fight scene in the heat of battle.
Yeah, I agree with Brett's point. This definitely fits into kind of that skirmisher type of role in battle where you can like move in because you have the mobility, strike, and then get out of there too a lot of times. It also makes a pretty good like utility or control class too. You have some different features that you get throughout your journey that can help you, empower your strikes. You get some evasion, different things that you can do to still your mind. So I think you get some of those pieces as well that can help bolster you, but also allow you to do a lot for your party in that same aspect.
To your point, Brett, about moving and attacking a lot, how many classes do we have that right off the bat you get 2 attacks? So you get your action attack, but then you can, as a bonus action, do an unarmed attack too. So it's like,
if you don't have armor on and are not using a weapon.
Correct. But I mean, if you're taking full advantage of your monk, you're probably not going to wear armor anyway. Right. You don't have proficiency in it.
So that should be one thing we should touch on now. Like your unarmored attack, you get extra bonuses just based on not wearing armor. Uh-huh. So you can be really strong and pack a punch without wearing armor naturally as a monk.
Well, yeah, you get to add your dexterity modifier and your wisdom modifier both to your AC for your unarmored defense, which we haven't talked about quick build yet, but obviously that's what it tells you to dump your points into.
Right.
I thought this one really complements. Well, I don't even know if it complements or competes with the rogue in a party. When you get into the heat of battle, those both can run around the rogue can do sneak attacks, disengages, all their cunning actions. But then you've got the monk who can just kind of slip in and out and jump and leap over top of things.
I think it depends on how you want to go about doing it.
Sure.
If you want to do it sneakily, you got to go rogue. But the monk has the ability to jump and move quickly in and out of a situation. Yes. But if you're trying to do it with stealth, you don't want to do that with a monk.
Nope.
You can.
You could.
Because at some point...
You're going to have high dexterity.
I think with one of the monastic traditions, you can eventually become invisible.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's handy.
Yeah. So, like, there's actually an option for that. If you want to be a monk,
You can make
but
yourself
do rogue
a rogue,
things.
but not be a rogue.
It's like a ninja.
Sure. Okay, yeah. I'm down for that.
Okay.
I'm not going to argue with you. If that's what you're waiting for.
I wasn't sure. All right. Any other pros before we move to cons? All right. What do you got on the cons list for the monk?
It's something we kind of talked about already, and I feel like if you're a first-time builder, anytime you play D&D, your gut reaction is you need armor to do something. So I think this is counterintuitive to a lot of players. And if you don't understand like where your AC comes from as a monk, you're going to be like, well, I need some chainmail or something in there, even though it's detrimental to actually do that. You're hurting yourself if you did that. So I think just that counterintuitiveness for like a first time builder, that lack of proficiency in army it would not be great for them just because of the stereotypical way they want to think about how you play D&D. But the pro side of that, as we talked about, is get you out of your dex and your wisdom. You're going to have a high AC without having any armor. So I think it's fine.
I think one of the biggest cons is if you're going up against a lot of ranged encounters, it's tricky as a monk. Like, you're not necessarily going to have a lot of abilities that can hit from range with a lot of punch.
Yeah, I agree. You won't do a lot of damage. You will probably have a high dex score, so you can, roll a short bow or something like that, but you can't use most of your strongest abilities.
Yeah. Thankfully, you've got the movement speed to get in there and cover a lot of distance to do so if you need to.
I listed it as a con. I'm not really sure it is or not. I thought that maybe the key features could be overwhelming to a new player, but they're really not any more difficult than learning spellcasting. Arguably, they're easier. Technically, a monk is not a magical class. The key is not considered to be like in the spellcasting range. It's basically the same thing, but technically...
It's the same thing, but it's own
It's the same
thing.
mechanic.
Yes.
Right.
But they don't consider it to be spell casting, if that makes sense. It's a rules thing, but...
I just had a moment of panic because, as we'll see with my character, I did a tiefling who you get thaumaturgy as a spell as a tiefling, but then I'm like, how do I get spell slots? And then I looked and it's like at will casting, so I'm like, okay, never mind, it's not a problem.
What do you use as your spellcasting modifier?
It doesn't say, because normally it's at the top. There's nothing there.
Ooh.
So, probably because thaumaturgy really isn't
It's not a damage.
It's not a damage dealing.
True,
So
right.
it's
Fair. You don't
flavor
need it.
more than anything. But
All right. Interesting. Anyway, we digress. Okay. Any other cons?
I think with the key that we're going to talk about here in a little bit, it's overwhelming at first a little bit, but I think you can settle in and use it faster than spells because they're not that complicated, quote unquote, spells. The usage of the key isn't that complicated. You just need to use them, where spells you have potentially endless options for different spells you can pick.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about the key, kind of over spell slots, is you don't have to say, oh, well, am I using a third level spell slot? Or it's like,
right, it's all the same.
It's 3 key points. What are you doing? So it's a little bit easier to keep track of. That kind of lends us into the quick build that is listed in the basic rules or the player's handbook. So we've got Dex listed in as highest, which makes sense for the unarmed strike. That's also what you trigger with like your Fury of Blows, some other things that we'll talk about here in a little bit when we get into that first level. And then wisdom for some of your key-driven items as well. So that's kind of why they lend into those. They suggest the hermit background, which I would say fits the stereotypical monk build.
Right.
You grew up in a secluded monastery. So obviously by no means are you married to that, but that is why they suggest it, is it fits the stereotype.
So did anybody here use the monk or use the monk?
Yes.
I did build
We
a
all
monk.
did. How many of us used the hermit as the background? Did anybody use it?
I did.
You did?
I did not.
I did not either.
I did intentionally because I didn't figure
Okay.
you guys would.
Smart.
All right, so that's kind of what they suggest for quick build. Now, first level features. What does a first level monk look like?
Well, you do get your unarmored defense.
What does that mean?
So that's where, when we were talking about not having armor and not wielding a shield, your AC equals 10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your wisdom modifier. So as long as you don't have any actual armor on that would modify those numbers, you get to use those modifiers to bring that number up, which is actually really handy because the way the quick build is, and they have you dump your high scores into dex and wisdom anyway, your highest modifiers are going to then be your AC is going to benefit from those higher rolls, depending on how you rolled, of course.
The other thing is you get martial arts at level 1. So this is like the offensive version of unarmored defense. So if you're not wearing armor and you're not wearing a shield, you get to do some bonuses, such as you can use dexterity instead of strength for your attack and damage rolls. And you can roll a d4 in place of the normal damage of your unarmed strike or monk weapon. So this isn't huge now, but it scales up as you grow in your monk levels. So that martial arts, being able to use an unarmed strike, just punching with your fist, gets more powerful as you go.
I think by the time you hit 5th level, you are up to a D6. You progress up to a D8 at 11th, and then ultimately to a D10 at 17th, which a D10, I think we've talked about before, there aren't that many, especially simple weapons, which your monk weapon has to be a simple melee weapon, that would hit in at a D10's worth of damage. So the nice part about that, too, is, you start hitting with a bonus action if you have used your unarmed strike or a monk weapon on your turn, as you basically can almost take like a second attack action on that.
At level 1.
At level 1.
So
Yeah.
getting to punch twice is huge when you only have 10 health.
Well, one of the things that the very first time I built a monk that I didn't understand was the monk weapon. Like, I'm pretty sure I only ever really used an unarmed strike because I didn't understand that I could use a monk weapon specifically.
Sure.
So they give you, it can be a short sword or any simple melee weapon that doesn't have the two-handed or the heavy property, which I think is all of them except like one, I'm pretty sure. So it's a good list that you can still pick from, and you can use that and get the bonus action still. I mean, that's pretty good.
Pretty dang good, yeah.
First level wise, I mean, that's kind of it. The monk has a D8 for its hit dice, so your starting HP is going to be 8 plus whatever your constitution modifier is. Does give a little importance to putting a little bit into con, so that way, if you are going to be in, especially in the battle, in the heat of things, yeah, you can probably jump out of there pretty quickly with your dex, but you may want to take a little bit in constitution, so you're not quite so easily downed. And then proficiencies was maybe something I would also list on the weakness side too. I don't feel like they have a ton of proficiencies.
Not really. Like it's pretty slim. Some pickings.
Yeah.
Kind of fits what you think would be a monk, though. Even disregard the monastic traditions and stuff for a second, but like you think like they're simple people, like they want to use what is available to them, their fists and very basic weapons. You wouldn't be proficient in anything but yourself, and yourself is the weapon you want to be proficient in.
So the skills you get to choose from: acrobatics, athletics, history, insight, religion, and stealth. Kind of all fits along those monk traits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. The only thing I thought was a little bit odd out of all that, your saving throws are in dex and strength, which maybe, I guess, like your resolve. I could see strength almost being more like your resolve instead of physical, but that's the one that I just
That's
thought
a little odd.
Yeah, instead of wisdom, but
odd, especially since I don't know about you guys, but I chose strength as my dump stat.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was one of my.
So
dump
it's like
stats,
Dex
too.
is great, but that strength save is oof, dang.
All right, and I think that's basically everything that fits into first level. Now, before we jump into kind of the big thing that you get as a monk, I want to talk a little bit about ki. So, what is ki?
It is the energy inside of you being used to do things, do cool things, make more oomph to your punches.
Right. It kind of goes back to that self weapon kind of deal. So it's like
You have honed your body.
you hone your body, you,
And your
you like
mind.
organize your mind, and you
Like channel.
channel. Yes, you channel your energy.
Yes.
Yes. Key is about channeling your energy to where you need it.
Yeah.
So it's like punch whatever you need. That's where your key goes.
And in essence, as the monk, right, you have this pool of key points of that energy that, in essence, you're storing up, and then you can release some of that energy to, power up some of your attacks, to do kind of different things as you grow as a monk.
So some of the cool ones right off the bat, Fury of Blows. So you can take a second unarmed strike as a bonus action. So if you make an unarmed attack with your first main action, you can do 2 unarmed strikes with a bonus action, and that would use 1 of your key points. Another one coming a little bit later at level 5 that I was really excited about is Stunning Strike. So I picture this as you punch somebody in the nose and it's just like, whoa, messes up their brain for a little bit and they're completely stunned for the whole round. And that uses 1 of your key points. And then your whole party can just waylay on the big baddie. And they have to make a constitution save, but that's a fairly easy thing to save, and you can just have a free round of combat.
So another thing you can use key for is patient defense and step of the wind allow you to use your key points or your kai. Is it kai or key?
I've heard it pronounced both, but
I have
typically
heard it that way
key.
too.
Either way.
Okay. So your key points you can use. So with patient defense, you can use it to use the dodge action as a bonus action. And with step of the wind, you can disengage or dash using a bonus action, which is kind of goes back to how we were talking about how you can get into battle, throw some punches, and get out. That bonus action allows you to get out of it without triggering an opportunity attack.
Or use it as a scout.
True. Get in and get
So
out.
Get in and
quick.
get out before your party has to do anything or before they notice you.
Yeah.
See, and I'm just thinking it's another way for me to play a rogue, but not actually be a rogue, so that way you don't accuse me of always playing a rogue.
Yeah, pretty much.
But Chris was
Well,
still
now
my dump stat.
Now you just told us your secret. So when you're playing a monk, it's like, okay, Phil, great. Still a rogue.
I think I will play the sneaky monk. Sneaky. Okay, so that is key, and I think especially Flurry of Blows is important because that ties into some of the monastic traditions. So that's your big 3rd level decision, first big one here. What is your primary combat style and technique gonna look like? Now, the basic rules only gives you one choice, and that is the way of the open hand.
One of the first things is the open hand technique. So when you hit a creature with one of your attacks, granted by your Fury Blows, you can knock them prone. They have to make a saving throw, and if they fail, they also can be pushed 15 feet away from you. And that lasts until your next turn.
The next one you get in there is called Wholeness of Body. At 6th level, you gain the ability to heal yourself to hit points equal to 3 times your monk level. So if you get that at 6th level, you can regain 18 hit points without the rest, which is a pretty big deal.
As a non-healing class.
Right.
Like, mostly.
Without
Right.
touching your hit die.
Right.
Yeah,
So you can't heal others, but you can heal yourself with that.
correct.
It does take a full action, though. So it does feel balanced in that regard.
I would agree. And you can only use it once before you have to long rest.
Yep.
So bumping up to the 11th level with the Way of the Open Hand, you hit Tranquility. So at the end of your long rest that you're taking to restore your wholeness of body, you actually get to gain the effect of this Sanctuary spell. And the big part that I thought here is that it lasts until the start of your next long rest. That's a ridiculously long amount of time for a
Long
sanctuary
time.
spell to
Wow.
last. Now, it can be broken, right? There's a saving DC listed on that. So it is basically 8 plus your whiz modifier, plus dex.
Your proficiency.
Or proficiency, yeah, plus your proficiency. So for anyone that's not familiar with the sanctuary spell, basically you are warding a creature within range against attack. So you set up this sanctuary. So anyone that targets that warded creature, so whether it's yourself or if it's one of your party members, something like that, if they target them with an attack or harmful spell, they have to make a wisdom saving throw. So based on that save DC that we just talked about, if they fail it, they have to pick a new target or they lose that attack or spell completely. So there are some, area of effect things that may not necessarily be kind of picked up by that. But for the most part, having that last for that long is pretty incredible.
Pro tip: write down who you have that cast on, because you will forget between if it's going for that length of time, you and or your dungeon master are going to forget that detail.
Oh, 100%. What's the big one? 17th level.
At 17th level, you gain the ability to set up lethal vibrations in someone's body. This is called Quivering Palm. When you hit a creature with an unarmed strike, you can spend 3 key points to start these imperceptible vibrations which last for a number of days equal to your monk level. That is a long time.
17 days.
17 days. The vibrations are harmless unless you use your action to end them. To do so, the target must be on the same plane of existence. When you use the action, the creature must make a Constitution saving throw. If it fails, it is reduced to 0 hit points, and if it succeeds, it's going to still take 10d10 of necrotic damage. That is huge. You do have to wait until 17th level to get that, but that is massive.
It's like an instant kill.
Yeah,
basically.
totally.
Or a crap ton of damage.
That is unreal.
I mean, you are having to spend 3 key points, but at 17th level, you have a whole bunch of them. You have 17 at that point.
And the only thing that, limitation to it as well is that you can only do it to one creature at a time. And that to end it, or to cause basically that final 0 hit points or 10d10 damage, they have to be on the same plane of existence. And when you're talking about 17th level, that could be harder than you think.
Yeah, no kidding. It's interesting for if you're facing a major enemy or something, that's if you go in and fight them, you use this and then you get out because you feel like you're in over your head or something, and then snap of a finger, they pretty much die. Which is crazy.
But you also have to think at that high of a level that some of the monsters that you're coming up against are gonna have pretty high saves.
True.
So they could still make it, but even if not, 100 necrotic damage is still rough.
That's pretty rough for sure.
So that is kind of your only option in Way of the Open Hand, but in the basic rules is Way of the Open Hand, but I'm pretty impressed by it actually.
Yeah.
It's a strong one to go with.
I would agree. The Player's Handbook does open us up to 2 others. So we have the Way of the Shadow and the Way of the 4 Elements. I'm not sure if you guys looked at these ones or not. So Way of the Shadow is, it's what I would refer to basically as like the ninja subclass in essence. So you follow a tradition that values stealth and subterfuge. So ninjas, spies, assassins, something along those lines. The pieces that I really liked about this option. So at 3rd level, you gain Shadow Arts. So you have to burn an action and use 2 key points to get this, but you can cast Darkness or Dark Vision or Pass Without a Trace or Silence. You don't have to have any of the material components. So that can come in handy if you do have some sort of a stealth mission. You also gain the Minor Illusion cantrip if you don't already know it. Bumping up to 6th level, you gain Shadow Step, which is a really cool...
Powerful.
Yeah, and I think is fun flavor-wise, too. It brings in additional components you wouldn't always think about. Where are the shadows? Because in essence, you can basically teleport from shadow to shadow as long as they're within 60 feet of one another. You also have advantage on the first melee attack you make before the end of the turn. So it starts also kind of feeding into that roguish side that we talked about.
That's a fun one to take and kind of throw your DM for a loop, because you're going to be like, okay, where's the sun and where are the shadows falling right now?
That's true.
Very true.
Yeah, let's not do that. All right.
Mental note to do that.
Yeah. So this is the class I kind of hit on earlier that you can eventually become invisible. So by using away the shadow at 11th level, you gain a cloak of shadows. So if you're in an area of dim light or darkness, you can use your action to become invisible. You remain invisible until you make an attack, cast a spell, or are in an area of bright light. So the advantage you get doing that as a rogue is that you would get sneak attack damage. Obviously, you don't get that as a monk. However, you definitely would have the advantage on those attacks if you are invisible to whoever you're attacking. And then lastly, 17th level Opportunist. So when a creature within 5 feet of you is hit by an attack made by a creature other than you, you can use your reaction to then make a melee attack against that creature too. So it's almost like getting an attack of opportunity in essence against another monster that's attacking one of your party members, which I thought was pretty good too, because you can already do a lot of attacking as a monk.
Right.
Just lay it on thick. Other option in the player's handbook is the Way of the Four Elements. So you've been taught to harness the elements, using them as an extension of your body. The last Avatar, The Last Airbender, in essence, like that's kind of where this would fall. There's a lot kind of to this class. I would say maybe as a new character, it might be a little bit more complex. There's a lot of choices because you know the elemental attunement discipline and then one other elemental discipline of your choice. And there's kind of a lot. And some of them have some different prerequisites that you'd have to look through as well. I think you could do a lot with this particular monastic tradition. But I don't know. Do you guys have thoughts on that? Did you look through some of those things?
I think there's just each one of these decisions on each decision on the monastic tradition that you're going to go with is going to set you up a lot all the way through upper levels. That's a big decision, and I think you should really focus on where you want to take your character once you reach that third level and are ready to make that decision.
I think it comes back somewhat to like when we talked about the pop culture references, right? Like what kind of a monk do you want to play? Because if you're trying to play, the traditional monastery type kung fu monk, Way of the Open Hand makes sense. If you want to play someone like Aang, the Last Airbender, that's going to be something more along the lines of the Way of the Four Elements. Or if you want to play a ninja, you're talking about the Way of Shadow. Some of that's going to come down to what type of monk do you want to play, because there is a lot kind of wrapped up in each one of those things.
I think this is one of the first classes that we've had that up until this third level, you're kind of making up your backstory and it's kind of fluff until you reach this point.
I would agree. I mean, I think even when I went to go build the character for today, I was trying to think about what I would pick.
Yes.
At third level.
Yeah.
Because when you start to put together a backstory, you kind of need to have an idea of what you want to do.
Have everything gel together.
Yeah, exactly. You don't kind of want to be wasting those first couple levels. Outside of the player's handbook and basic rules, we do have some more options. I'll hit on them briefly. I don't want to spend a lot of time on those, but we have the Way of Mercy, which comes from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Here you can use your key points to heal or harm. It's almost like a chiropractor if you kind of read through it. You can eventually revive a fallen creature, though. So we need a Way of the Mercy monk to help Brett this week after scooping snow. In Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, we have the Way of the Ascendant Dragon. So you gain draconic features. So something akin to like a Breath of the Dragon. You can temporarily get wings. One of the cool parts of this was the ability to create an aura of frightful presence around you, or an aura of resistance, kind of whatever your party needs. More of a support type scenario there. We have the Way of the Astral Self from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So this is more about drawing your key to call forth components of your astral self. You can actually call forth like astral arms, an astral visage, astral body, and then awaken them to actually, kind of boost the damage that those things can do or what they can do for you. Cool concept. Definitely lends itself well to having a very high wisdom score. That plays into that astral self. The Way of the Cobalt Soul comes from the Tal'Dorei campaign setting Reborn. Know thine enemy. You analyze your foes to learn their weaknesses, and it grants you insight into their vulnerabilities. You can eventually use your key points to take additional reactions or to grant creatures. Basically, you give them a vulnerability to a certain type of damage, so that way you can just wail on them. We have the Way of the Drunken Master from Xanther's Guide to Everything. I love this one. I've played it before. It creates a lot of fun role-playing opportunities during combat. So even if you're not like a super high charisma player, which I am not, it still gives you some opportunity to build that into your combat. You can eventually cancel disadvantage and fight off a mob of goons with up to 5 flurry of blows attacks, like at very high level. But this is pretty much a flavor, like monastic tradition. You don't really get a lot else from it.
Secretly, the three of us are monks of the Way of the Drunken Master.
That's fair. I would concur. Then we have the Way of the Kensai. This comes from Xanther's Guide to Everything. You get weapon mastery. A lot of the comments around, Jedi, some Jedi are monks. Mm-hmm. They refer to this, the Way of the Kensai. So they have weapon mastery over a lightsaber. The features of this one are actually pretty easy. So you can grant up to 3 bonus points on attack and damage rolls using one of your Kensei weapons, which is kind of the big thing for that one as well. But if you are a new player, I actually thought that one was pretty easy to follow. We have the Way of the Long Death. This comes from the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. You are a student of death and incorporate it into your fighting style. You can frighten those around you. You can drop to 1 hit point instead of 0. Your touch channels the energy of death. At one point, pretty high level, you can roll up to 20 d10 necrotic damage by using some of your key points. And then lastly, from some of the major sources, is the Way of the Sun Soul. That also comes to us from the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. You get a cool Radiant Sunbolt weapon, which is pretty awesome. Very heavy on radiant damage, and you can boost your attack power with your key. So those are some of the other options that are out there kind of outside of the basic rules and the player's handbook.
Nice.
So let's jump now into our builds. Who wants to start us tonight?
I'll start. I created her name is Amani Lados. She is a tiefling monk. Just a couple things here so that we keep on moving. I did do the quick build. I put my top 2 rolls in dexterity and wisdom. I actually rolled 4 15s.
What?
And then a 13 and a 5. So it's like I have several +2s, but my intelligence and my strength are not great. Strength of 5, so there's a -3 as my modifier on strength. That's why my strength saving throw is a -1. It's not good. But with that unarmored defense, I have an armor class of 14, which is really nice because I put a couple of those 15s in the Dex and Wisdom. I'm trying to think what else. I did think of her as being like a traditional monk in terms of like the way she would fight. So I was thinking like Way of the Open Hand is probably the way she would go, even though we can't pick that yet. Let's see, what else did I choose? I went with a spear with the weapon. I thought about doing daggers, but I thought that was a little too close combat. I wanted something that,
You could throw.
I could throw. Yeah. I mean, you can throw daggers too, but I wanted to, like when I think of a monk, I think of like walking around with a quarterstaff, but a quarterstaff wasn't an option. So spear is the way I went. Now the interesting thing is going with the tiefling. She does have defenses against fire. She's resistant to fire, and she does get the thaumaturgy spell. So just some cool little flavor things for her. And then the one other thing, we were talking about backgrounds earlier, how they suggest you go with the hermit background to get that stereotypical monk. I actually went with nobility because her backstory to me was more like early in her life. I don't want to say a sinner, but she did a lot of bad things. She rebelled against her parents. She stole things. She did things like that. And so to right herself, she went to a temple and became a monk. And then now she's trying to put herself on the path of righteousness kind of thing. So that kind of falls into that trope of being that normal monk that we think of kind of thing too.
That's cool.
So anything else that I need to hit on that we talked about? Brett, what do you got?
So mine is a wood elf monk named Aiden Swiftstrike. Thought the name was perfectly fitting for this one.
Very nice.
And he is basically a Ninja Bounty Hunter.
Yes.
Nice.
So with being a wood elf, you automatically get a wisdom bonus. And so my wisdom and dex were my top two. Dexterity coming in at an 18, wisdom at a 17. And then I did pretty well on the other ones, 13s and 14s. And then charisma was my dump at 12. But straight off from level 1, I come in at armor class of 17. So good luck hitting this at level 1. Later on, that'll scale a little bit, but at level 1, this is pretty tanky.
Nice.
But then as a bounty hunter and kind of a ninja bounty hunter, I'm positioning myself for down the road, picking up Way of the Shadow as my monastic tradition. So going that ninja route that we've been talking about.
Nice. I kind of went along those same lines as Brett, so I think ultimately I would like to end up with Way of the Shadow for the ninja side as well, but I went with a Lightfoot halfling monk.
Nice.
Her name is Sylph, and I rolled okay. So dumped everything per quick build. My highest was Dex. As a Lightfoot halfling, I get a +2 racial bonus in Dex, so my Dex score is at a 19. Next up was Wisdom. I put that as a 16 for +3. Next up was Constitution, because I didn't want to just get struck down immediately, even with a high AC as well of 17 at first level. Intelligence, and then my dumps were Strength. I got a 10 in Strength for a +0 modifier, which is going to make that saving throw a lot of fun. And Charisma, which everyone knows is Phil's favorite dump stat, is a 9, even with that extra +1 from my racial bonus.
Boy,
So
we stuck to those stereotypes for us pretty tight.
rolling in at a -1 modifier for my charisma. I chose the mace as my monk weapon. I just felt like that's kind of the route that I wanted to go. I did go with the hermit background, and backstory-wise, I actually did a lot in this space, and we don't have to hit on all of it. But Whisper was my character's original name. She was born into the bustling heart of a hidden halfling village, deep in a forgotten forest. Basically, she was a natural acrobat, but she wanted more. Logic, not laughter, was her muse. While other children chased butterflies, she dissected their wings, analyzed their flight patterns and their intricate designs. One day, she stumbled upon a hidden path leading to a secluded monastery atop a mountain peak. The monks there recognized her talent for martial arts and her inner wisdom. They took her in and renamed her Sylph for her silent wind-like movements. So for decades, she trained under their tutelage, mastered unarmed combat, turning her small stature into an advantage through swift strikes and acrobatic maneuvers. She embraced their life. She found solace in the rhythmic meditation. Her social interactions, however, remained a mystery. So etiquette and small talk were alien concepts replaced by grunts and gestures. You gotta hit that -1 charisma in there somewhere. So now she's venturing out into the unknown. Her silence a shield, and her fists a beacon of justice. She carries the weight of her monastic training, her mind a fortress of logic, yet her heart, once dormant, stirs with a newfound sense of purpose. So she is tall for a halfling, actually, as well. I think she, let me find it, 3'10", and because of kind of her monk training, she is rather muscly, so she's like 52 pounds as well, which is pretty heavy for a halfling.
Sure.
But I don't know. This one was a lot of fun to build. I had a good time with this one.
Nice.
You know, picking up a halfling is an interesting choice because you're small, so you can move through the larger creatures' spaces.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons that I picked it was because of that. I also love that they have the lucky racial trait. So if I roll a 1 on a d20 for an attack roll, ability check, or a saving throw, I get to re-roll it. And I have to use the new roll, but hey, anything's better than a 1. They're also naturally stealthy. So I can even try to hide Even if there is just a creature, like a normal sized creature like you guys is in front of me, I can try to hide behind you.
And once again, Phil picking up rogue traits every other character uses.
Big surprise. Ding, 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 ding.
Okay, I was building a rogue without building a rogue, okay? Call me out on it. I don't care. All right. Well, I think build-wise, that's all I had on mine. Yeah, I think we hit on everything there. Let's start wrapping this one up. I feel like we've been at this one for a while. Final thoughts on a rogue. Or, oh my gosh. I did it right there. I just did it.
Freudian slip.
I called out.
Right?
Final thoughts on the monk.
I really like the monk as a class. I think one of the things after we've gone through this whole episode that I like most, because one of my favorite things when building a character is coming up with the backstory and the story behind this character, is like choosing that monastic tradition gives you a path from the very beginning. And even though you don't get it until level 3, you have to be thinking about that at level 1. So if you can like lay out, it gives you that path to set up your story and then actually utilize that somewhere. Whereas 9 times out of 10, what you come up with is fluff and you forget it by the time you get 3-4 levels into your character anyway. I would totally build a monk.
I think this one can be a lot of fun. I think you need to keep a focus on keeping an eye on where your character is going and keeping the substance in that character. You're going to be really good in combat. Make sure you're still contributing to your party throughout the rest of your character as well.
I would say that for as easy as setting up a level 1 monk is, you have to keep that in mind where you're going, because it can get complex really, really fast. So if you choose a monastic tradition like the 4 elements one, you could set yourself up to be in trouble if you're not thinking far enough ahead. Like, you get there and you don't really know what you want to do with this character, you may go, oh crap, I don't know what to pick anymore, or this isn't really the path that I wanted to go, kind of thing.
Work with your DM.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think it's important to know what you can do with your key points, especially too, like as you're growing as a monk character, to make sure that you understand what all you have available to you, because you definitely could be missing out on things. But as far as being an entry-level character, relatively easy for new players, I would say that the monk qualifies in that aspect.
For sure.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Bards and Barrels. You can listen to past episodes of the show anywhere podcasts can be found. Want to stay in the loop and not miss the latest from us? Be sure to head over and give us a like and a follow on Facebook at Bards and Barrels. You can now also follow us on Instagram. We'll see you soon.